first point I wanted to cover is his grip. When you're watching him on TV, you might be under the impression that he uses pretty close to an Eastern grip, but if you look at his picture, it is actually between an Eastern grip and a semi-Western grip, actually leaning more towards a semi-Western. If you compare that to Federer or Del Potro's photos, you can see that his grip is actually a little bit more rotated when he's making contact with the ball. So this is actually not an uncommon grip that we would see nowadays from the top players. It is more, I would say, old school than a lot of these guys like Nadal or Zverev, but it's not that uncommon to see that. I think this is also the reason why Tsitsipas' forehand might, when you look at it, it might come across it as flatter. This grip is a little bit more difficult to add topspin to shots, but it's actually a quite common forehand grip. So the second point is, I thought it was quite interesting how he brings his left hand all the way back, and he has a kind of a late release. It's actually very good technique. A lot of us, especially if you're playing at the club level, you tend to release your left hand from the racket too early, and that makes your forehand be all over the place. Because while it's important to point at the ball when you're hitting it, but releasing your left hand too early might make you lose balance. So Tsitsipas keeps his left hand holding the racket until he can't do it any longer. So this makes it into a compact forehand, and it's very good for consistency. So the third point I thought it was very, very interesting was how little his upper arm and his wrist move throughout the shot. So if you pay attention to it, you can just draw a line here and you see that his upper arm barely moves throughout the shot. And this is actually very nice because that's what gives him that consistency in every forehand he hits, and pretty much the low amount of mistakes he'll make throughout the shot. The fourth point I thought it was also interesting was that during his whole stroke, his racket does not face the ground at any point. So if you pay attention to it, you can see the W in his racket at all times. So this is actually very different from what we see normally. This racket, if you pay attention to Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, at some point, all of their forehands have the racket facing the ground. So this is, I think, the reason why when you look at Tsitsipas' forehand, it looks very, very kind of almost sort of a continental grip, but it's just because he keeps his wrist so stable throughout the shot, and he doesn't rotate it facing the ground, and this is why looks very old school. So the fifth point, I thought it was beautiful to see how he makes contact in front of his body and how he extends the shot all the way. He does a really nice job with that, and I think he has to do this because with his grip and his swing, I don't think he'll be able to generate a lot of topspin otherwise, but this is why he needs to compensate, and he generates most of his topspin at the end here, so almost with his wrist at the end. So it's actually a very nice image you can see, but I thought it was beautifully executed. And so the last and final point I wanted to touch on is about his stance when he hits the shots. So you notice that Tsitsipas will hit most of his shots when he has the time on the forehand side with either a closed stance or a semi-open stance. So the reason why he does that is because his swing is so particular, and his grip is more, I would say, kind of like leaning more towards an Eastern, is because he cannot generate a lot of power just from his arm. So he needs to be well balanced and well positioned to hit those effective forehands. So if it's hitting them from a open stance, he's not going to be able to generate that much power. So I thought that was quite interesting as well.